Mike Wallace had interviewed presidents. He had interviewed Nixon after Watergate, and Ayatollah Khomeini in Tehran, and Malcolm X before Malcolm X was Malcolm X to the general public. And every complicated, powerful, difficult figure that CBS News had decided the American public needed to be confronted with over the 40 years that Mike Wallace had been doing the confronting. He was 78 years old, and he had been in television news since 1951, and he had developed, in those 45 years, a very specific style. The style of the question that arrives from a direction the subject did not anticipate. The question that uses the subject's own words or circumstances or visible evidence against them. The question that is not asking for information, but for a reaction. He was good at it. He was, by most accounts, the best at it. The Mike Wallace interview was a specific and recognized phenomenon in American journalism. The interview that celebrities and politicians and executives tried to decline, and then agreed to because declining was its own kind of statement. The interview that arrived at the subject's door and left with something the subject had not planned to give. He had made senators cry and made executives contradict themselves on camera, and made the powerful uncomfortable in the specific, public, documented way that the powerful are rarely made uncomfortable. He arrived at Tina Turner's home in Nice, France in the spring of 1996. The home was a villa on the French Riviera, a property of considerable size and obvious expense, the kind of house that exists at the intersection of success and taste, that communicates both without announcing either. There was an infinity pool that looked out over the Mediterranean. There were terraces and gardens, and the particular quality of light that the south of France produces in spring. The light that has been described in enough paintings and enough novels that it has become one of the recognizable lights of the world. The light that says, "This is a place where someone has chosen to live well." Tina Turner had lived here for a decade. She had come to Europe in the years after the comeback, had come and had not left, because Europe had received her in a way that America had not quite managed, had given her the specific recognition of a continent that understood what she was without requiring her to explain it, that had filled stadiums and arenas in city after city, and had told her, in the most direct commercial language available, that what she had built was real and permanent and not going anywhere. She had settled in Nice. She had the villa. She had the pool. She had Erwin Bach, who was sitting somewhere in the house while Mike Wallace walked through the rooms asking his questions. Mike Wallace was asking questions. He was asking them in the way he asked questions, with the specific, practiced ease of someone who has been asking questions for 45 years and has learned that the most effective questions are the ones that appear casual, that arrive in the conversation without announcing themselves as the thing they actually are. He had been asking about the house. He had been asking about her career in Europe, about the tours and the stadiums, and the specific, enormous scale of what she had built on a continent that was 3,000 miles from Nutbush, Tennessee. They were standing by the infinity pool. The pool was at the edge of the property, where the terrace met the view, the Mediterranean visible beyond it, the water catching the spring light in the specific, extravagant way of water in expensive places. It was the kind of view that is designed to communicate something, that exists not merely as scenery, but as a statement. Someone lives here who has earned the right to look at this every morning. Mike Wallace looked at the pool. He looked at the view. He looked at Tina Turner. He said, "Do you think you deserve all this?" The question arrived in the spring air of the French Riviera, and for a moment it was simply there. The specific, slightly staggering question of a 78-year-old man who had spent 45 years asking difficult questions and had decided, standing next to an infinity pool in Nice, that this was the question the moment required. Tina Turner looked at him. She had been in music since 1958. She had been on stages since before Mike Wallace was the Mike Wallace that people knew. She had survived Ike Turner, had survived 16 years of a marriage that had included things she had described in her autobiography and in the film, and in dozens of interviews in the years since. Things that Mike Wallace himself had just been asking her about, because the interview had gone there too, had gone to the specific, documented history of what Ike Turner had done and what it had cost her, and how she had left with 36 cents and rebuilt everything from nothing. The villa was not inherited. The pool was not a gift. The view was not provided by anyone. It had been purchased with the specific, accumulated proceeds of a comeback that the industry had not believed in, that had happened anyway, that had produced 12 million records and 3 Grammy Awards, and the kind of sustained commercial success in Europe that Mike Wallace had just told her he had not known about until he started preparing for this interview. She had done all of it. She stood at the edge of her pool on the French Riviera in the spring of 1996, and Mike Wallace asked her if she deserved it. And she looked at him with the specific, complete, unhurried attention of someone who has heard a question and has decided, in the moment of hearing it, exactly what the answer is. She said, "I deserve more." 2 words, not a speech, not an explanation, not the careful, qualified, self-deprecating response of someone who has been asked whether they deserve something and has decided that the appropriate register is modesty, that the optics of an unambiguous yes are complicated for a woman in a public setting, that it is safer and more palatable and more socially acceptable to deflect. She did not deflect. She said what was true in the specific, direct language of someone who has spent decades surviving things that would have finished most people and has arrived, at 56 years old, at the particular, earned clarity of someone who knows exactly what she has survived and what it cost and what it was worth. "I deserve more." Mike Wallace did not respond immediately. He was a man who had been in television long enough to understand the specific weight of a pause, who knew that silence after a strong statement is not empty but full, that the pause is part of the communication, that what you do in the seconds after someone says something unexpected tells the audience something about what was said. He paused. He looked at Tina Turner. She looked back at him with the complete, undefended steadiness of someone who has said what she meant and is not revising it. The interview continued. Mike Wallace asked about Erwin Bach, who was introduced, the German music executive who had been in Tina's life for a decade by then, who had been there for the comeback and the stadiums and the villa, and who would be there for everything that followed, including the marriage in 2013, and the Swiss citizenship, and the house above the lake in Zurich, and the years of what Tina would describe as the specific quiet happiness of someone who has arrived, after a very long road, at something that deserves the word. Mike Wallace asked about Ike. She talked about it the way she had learned to talk about it, with the specific, controlled candor of someone who has told the story many times and has found, in the telling, a way to be honest without being consumed. She talked about the face, about how he had hit her in the face, always the face, because he wanted it visible. She talked about the nose, how it had been damaged badly enough to require corrective surgery, how the sinuses had never fully recovered. She talked about these things in the specific, plain language of medical facts, the language that is most devastating precisely because it is not dramatic. Mike Wallace listened. He was a journalist of the old school, the school that believed in the confrontational question, in the direct challenge, in the willingness to ask things that made people uncomfortable in the service of something called the public's right to know. He had used these tools on presidents and criminals and executives and senators. He had used them on Tina Turner. He had asked her, standing by her infinity pool in Nice, France, in the spring of 1996, whether she deserved the life she had built. She had told him she deserved more. The clip of the exchange circulated for years. Circulated in the specific, accumulating way of things that find new audiences in new eras, that are discovered and rediscovered by people who were not there when it happened, and for whom the exchange carries a different meaning than it would have carried in 1996. When Tina Turner died on May 24, 2023, the clip went viral in the specific, immediate way of things that are waiting for the right moment to reach the people who need to see them. Millions of people watched Mike Wallace ask the question. Millions of people watched Tina Turner answer it. Tina Turner had been born in Brownsville, Tennessee in 1939. She had left Nutbush with nothing particular. She had married Ike Turner and survived 16 years of what that marriage was. She had left with 36 cents. She had rebuilt everything. She had sold 100 million records. She had bought a villa in Nice with an infinity pool that looked out over the Mediterranean. Mike Wallace had stood next to that pool and asked her if she deserved it. She had said, "I deserve more." 3 words that said everything the autobiography had said, and the film had said, and every interview had said, in the specific compression of 3 words that land so precisely that they do not require anything after them. Not an explanation, not a qualification, not the careful hedging of someone who is worried about how the answer will play. Just the answer. Just the truth. Mike Wallace died on April 7, 2012. He was 93 years old and had been in television news for more than 60 years. Tina Turner died on May 24, 2023, in Küsnacht, Switzerland, in the house above the lake. The villa in Nice was sold years before she died. She had moved on to other things, to the lake and the mountains, and Irwin, and the specific, hard-won piece of someone who had spent 60 years performing for the world and had decided, finally, that the world could wait until after 2 in the afternoon. The pool is still there. The view is still there. And somewhere in the archive of 60 Minutes, in the footage that has been watched millions of times since May 2023, Mike Wallace is still standing at the edge of the pool asking the question. And Tina Turner is still looking at him. And the answer is still the same answer it was the first time. I deserve more. She had answered all of them. She had answered them. Mike Wallace had gone to Nice to ask Tina Turner difficult questions. 3 words. I deserve more. The weight of 36 cents on a Dallas freeway. The weight of 16 years. The weight of the small rooms and the hotel ballrooms and the comeback circuit and the 2-week recording window and the label that committed to not promoting the album that sold 12 million copies. The weight of all of it was in those 3 words. And the people who watched the clip in May 2023 felt the weight the way you feel the weight of things that have been compressed into a small space. Not immediately, not all at once, but building, the way the significance of a thing builds in you after you have received it. They felt the weight behind them. People who had spent their lives being told, in the specific, ambient, culturally distributed way that the message is delivered, through the accumulation of 1,000 small daily signals rather than through any single overt statement, that they did not deserve what they had, or that wanting what they had not yet been given was presumptuous, or that the correct posture was gratitude for what was already there, rather than the assertion that more was deserved. Those people watched Tina Turner say 3 words and felt something in the words that the words, by themselves, do not contain. The response was not complicated. When Tina Turner died, the clip was pulled from the archive and posted to social media. And it moved through the feeds of people who had not been born in 1996, and people who had been children in 1996, and people who had watched the original broadcast and remembered it, and people who were seeing it for the first time. And all of them watched Mike Wallace ask the question, and all of them watched Tina Turner answer it. That moment came in May 2023. The clip of the pool scene, the 30 seconds in which Mike Wallace asked his question, and Tina Turner gave her answer, was watched by the people who watched 60 Minutes in 1996, and was then stored in the CBS archive, along with every other 60-minute segment from every other year, in the vast, accumulating library of things that had been said on American television, and were waiting for the moment when someone would need to hear them again. The 60-minute segment aired in 1996. He moved on to the pool and the view, and the question about deserving, and Tina Turner's answer, and the specific, irreversible moment of a woman standing at the edge of her life and telling a journalist who had spent 45 years asking difficult questions that what he was looking at was not enough. Mike Wallace moved on. She said this in the specific language of someone who has been thinking about this for a long time and has found the precise words for it, the words that are true and that are also, not incidentally, the words that close the question, that give the interviewer nowhere further to go because the answer is complete. Energy, not sex. The distinction was not semantic. The distinction was the difference between a woman who performs for the desire of others and a woman who performs from the force of herself. And Tina Turner had been the second thing since 1958 and was not about to allow Mike Wallace to reclassify her as the first. She said, "It's not about sex, it's about energy." Not with deflection, not with the careful, managed response of a publicist-coached celebrity navigating a difficult interview. With the direct, complete, unhurried engagement of someone who has been asked variations of this question for 30 years and has arrived at her own very clear understanding of what the answer is. Tina Turner had handled this the way she handled the other questions. He had asked about her sexuality, had approached the subject of her stage presence, her deliberate, sustained, unapologetic deployment of her own body as part of the performance, in the way that journalists of his generation approached this subject with women, which was with a specific combination of fascination and skepticism, as if the fact of a woman presenting herself as sexual was itself something that required examination and justification. The question had not been the only difficult thing Mike Wallace asked that day. There is a difference. She was honest about it. She was not gracious about it. Not, "I deserve this." Not, "I worked hard for this." Not, "I earned this through sacrifice and talent and persistence against significant odds." All of that was true, and all of that was contained in the answer, but the answer was not those things. The answer was, "I deserve more." The present tense, the ongoing assertion, the refusal to accept the frame of the question, which was the frame of enough, of arrival, of the completed narrative of a woman who had been through hard things and had come out the other side with a nice house and could now be gracious about it. And she said the thing she had been saying all along, in the most compressed and direct and unambiguous form available. "I deserve more." And then Mike Wallace asked it out loud. She had been answering it with the comeback. She had been answering it with the private dancer sessions, and the Grammys, and the world tours, and the stadiums, and the villa in Nice, and the pool, and the view. She had been answering it every night, on every stage in every city for 12 years. She had been answering it in every room that had said no and found out it was wrong. She had been answering it since 1984. Do you deserve this? She does not look away. She does not smile the specific, careful smile of someone who is about to say something that they want to land gently, that they are softening for delivery. She looks at Mike Wallace with the complete, unguarded attention of someone who has been waiting for this question. Not because she knew it was coming, not because she had prepared for it, but because the question that Mike Wallace was asking was the question that Tina Turner had been answering with her life since the night she left Ike Turner on a Dallas freeway with 36 cents. She does not hesitate. It is not in the words themselves. The words are clear and short and do not require interpretation. It is in what happens in Tina Turner's face in the fraction of a second between Mike Wallace finishing his question and Tina Turner beginning her answer. It is the specific, almost imperceptible thing that happens when someone who has been asked something they have already answered, have been answering, internally, for years, encounters the question in its public form for the first time. There is a specific quality to the moment in the clip where Tina Turner says the words. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who deserves to hear it today. Subscribe for more stories about the human beings behind music's greatest legends. The questions, the answers, the pools in Nice where someone finally said the thing that needed to be said. Hit the notification bell so you never miss one of these stories.